witches and wizards of the world! This is the Hogwarts Chaplain coming to you from the Room of Requirement, broadcasting across the globe on the WWN, the Word and Wizard Network. My friends, in the last few days, and specifically in the last 24 hours, Americans are becoming more and more familiar with the current Muggle president's new healthcare proposal. He is, in his words, living up to a campaign promise to repeal and replace Obamacare. But now we have the actual proposal, and it has upset a great number of people. People are upset by the fact that less people are covered. Other people love the proposal, because less people are covered, it costs less over time. You may be saying to yourself, you out there in the passionate resistance, you may feel frustrated by this bill, because you see that it does cut the number of people who will be covered. Some say 14 to 15 million people when the bill is enacted, and over time, more like 24 or 25 million people. This frustrates you greatly, but you look in the mirror and say to yourself, I am not a healthcare expert. I am not exactly sure what numbers to propose or what means to suggest. My friends, remember the current Muggle president and many of his fans are not healthcare experts either, but they are driven by strong philosophical principles, and that is exactly what we're going to discuss today on the WWN. What is the philosophy that undergirds and explains this particular healthcare proposal? Because if we can understand that philosophy, we will understand where this bill comes from, where it is going, what changes they might make or not make in it. In fact, we will know a great deal about all of the future public policy of the current Muggle president if we can understand this philosophy, both of the current Muggle president and especially on the issue of healthcare and the budget, the current Muggle Speaker of the House, a Mr. Paul Ryan. So let's dive in, my friends, and understand their philosophy, and then we will check in the great works of the life and times of Harry Potter to understand the philosophy found in those stories. A philosophy that means a great deal to you, maybe though you've never named it or listed out its parts. We will do that, and then we will end by looking at a little bit of scripture to see if it does in fact reflect what we find in the Harry Potter stories. So, the current Muggle president's healthcare bill is a great expression of the philosophy of this particular Muggle, a woman named Ayn Rand. Some of you have heard of her called Anne Rand. I guess it depends how well you know her. In any case, you may say to yourself, I do not know who this Muggle is. And that is okay, but what you should know is Mr. Paul Ryan knows exactly who this woman is. In fact, many people who have written the current healthcare proposal love this woman. My friends, this woman was born in 1905 in Russia. What is it about Russia and the Republican Party? I digress. This particular Muggle was born in Russia in 1905. She came to the United States, apparently started to weep when she saw the Statue of Liberty, was grateful for the rest of her life for the openness she found in America to immigrants. But she was fleeing Russia and what she called the warped socialism and communism that had taken over that country. She came here, she married an American, became an American citizen in 1929, and died in 1982. Her ideas, her philosophy, which she called objectivism, became very popular among Republicans and conservatives for decades. She wrote philosophical works, but she also wrote two very important novels that are very popular to this day among people who are proponents of objectivism. What is objectivism? Well, let's go right to her own words, my friends. Ayn Rand said this about her philosophy of objectivism. Its essence is that the concept of man is that he is a historic and a heroic and only being of his destiny, and his own happiness is the moral purpose of his life, and productive achievement is his noblest activity, and reason is his only absolute. My friends, Miss Rand was an atheist. She also did not like what she called altruism, or charity, loving one's neighbor. She believed that this was not a bad thing, but it was a terrible thing when government tried to do it. She was a fierce, fierce defender of individual rights, of private property. She hated taxes. She believed the federal government should only take money for national defense or a few interstate roads. She did not believe that we are each other's brother and sister, or we are each other's keeper. The Libertarian Party in the United States, my friends, was founded on her ideas. Go to their, what do the Muggles call it, website, and you will see that the Libertarian Party says Ayn Rand is their foundress. There are also a great number of people in Washington that say she is the most important philosopher of the 20th century. It is not just Paul Ryan, who in more than one interview said he gives her books out as Christmas presents and has since high school when he read his first Ayn Rand sample. And he gives her books to every member of his staff and says they have to read it. And, most notably, he gives a copy of the writings of Ayn Rand to every new member of Congress from the Republican Party and has done that for over a decade that he's been in Congress. Paul Ryan loves this woman. But so does Clarence Thomas and Antonin Scalia, two Supreme Court justices who say she is their favorite philosopher. Their favorite philosopher. Alan Greenspan, who headed up the Federal Reserve for many years, he said he thought Ayn Rand was his favorite philosopher. She has a political party. There are even reading groups on the Hill among the Republicans to meet weekly or monthly and discuss specifically the readings of Ayn Rand. My friends, there is a certain group of people who are supporting the current Muggle president who think the ideas of this woman, radical individualism, no taxes, limited government, everyone for themselves, everyone's happiness being their chief moral purpose in life. This is the philosophy that explains the health care proposal. Last week, on the Muggle radio, Mr. Ryan was interviewed by someone who himself was a conservative, saying to him that there are parts of this bill that are not really Republican and not really conservative. But notice Mr. Ryan's answer. He said, do not get lost in the details. The greatest victory, he said. We are on the verge of the great victory of, in his words, defederalizing an entitlement program. And he is right in saying that all the way back to the New Deal, this has not yet happened. The government has not yet done what he believes it can now do with Republican control of both houses and the White House. It can remove itself from the lives of individuals in the forms of mandates or taxes. We can defederalize the health care of people. And this is so exciting to Mr. Ryan and to the followers of Ayn Rand. This is their great dream of decades, that the government would get out of any form of altruism, what she called collectivism, which all smelled a lot to her like socialism or communism from Russia. Yes, Paul Ryan says, we are going to pull the government out. We are going to give taxes back, and if people want to take care of one another, let them do that. But it will no longer be the business of the federal government to take money from someone in one state and send it to another, because everyone is to another a wolf, as Hobbes and Locke said in the Enlightenment philosophy that also explains and brings us Ayn Rand. This idea that we only enter social contracts by choice. We are not born into moral obligation to one another. We can choose that. We can choose that to protect ourselves. We can choose that to maximize our resources. But in fact, all social contracts are just that. Contracts that free individuals should be allowed to enter or not by choice. My friends, this is against the entire philosophy of an insurance system. Any insurance system is based on the idea that you pay in because you might pay out, and that someone else who doesn't have enough might need some of what you have. This is the logic not of the Democratic Party, not of American democracy. This is the logic of care, collective care. That is what is standing in between this law, this current healthcare law, and reality. My friends, now that we have considered the philosophy that explains and defends and in many ways defines the social policy of the Republican Party and of the current Muggle president, and most especially of the current Speaker of the Muggle House, let's take a dip into the Harry Potter stories and ask ourselves, is there any objectivism that's present in Harry Potter, and how is it treated? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it an okay thing for us to believe and practice? Well, in order to begin, we go to one passage in the 7th book of the 7-book series by the great Professor J.K. Rowling. And it is a passage that actually describes a radio broadcast of the WWN. It is at one of the darkest times of Voldemort's reign. Witches and wizards are disappearing or being murdered. In fact, even Muggles, which pose no direct threat to Voldemort or his people at all. But they are part of the carnage, disappearing, being murdered. And Lee Jordan is interviewing Kingsley, who will become the next Minister for Magic after the defeat of Voldemort and bring in lovely and wonderful and moral reforms to Azkaban, to education, and to civil liberties. But at the point in this particular passage, they are underground. And here is the message that Kingsley has to all the listeners, all the wizards and witches tuning in to the underground radio broadcast. He says this about the dark times. Muggles remain ignorant of the source of their suffering as they continue to sustain heavy casualties, said Kingsley. Quote, however, we continue to hear truly inspirational stories of wizards and witches risking their own safety to protect Muggle friends and neighbors, often without the Muggles' knowledge. I'd like to appeal to all of our listeners to emulate their example, perhaps by casting a protective spell over a Muggle dwelling on your street. Many lives could be saved if such simple measures were taken. And what would you say, though, to listeners who reply that in these dangerous times it should be only wizards first? Asked Jordan Lee. But then Kingsley says this, quote, I'd say that it's one short step from wizards first to purebloods first, and then to Death Eaters first, said Kingsley. We're all humans, aren't we? We're all humans, aren't we? Every life is worth the same and worth saving. My friends, in one passage, we have the ultimate rebuke against objectivism. And what is objectivism? It is to treat people, to treat everything like, as the word says, objects, whose worth is determined by, as she said, free markets, laissez-faire capitalism. How much is a thing worth? It's worth what someone will pay for it. How much is human labor worth? What someone is willing to pay for it. Therefore, she hates the minimum wage. She would vomit at a living wage. How much is a human being worth? In objectivism, what someone is willing to pay for it. It objectifies, turns into objects, turns into what the Muggles call commodities. All people, all things. But here you have a great wizard who will become the next Minister for Magic, saying, no, that is not a society worthy of the name democracy. We are each other's brother and keeper. We are each other's sister and keeper. Yes, my friends, aren't we all human? This is the answer to objectivism. We have responsibilities for one another. But the second place in the Harry Potter series where we find an answer to this particular healthcare philosophical mess is in the definition of a Horcrux. I hate to even use the term, my good friends, because a Horcrux is perhaps the darkest magic there is. But you know, if you've read the stories, how a Horcrux is created. Yes, my friends, it is created when one person destroys another person. And then the person who does the destroying has a part of their soul ripped apart. Yes, my friend, murder shatters the soul. You cannot take the humanity away from someone and not have a part of your humanity destroyed as well. This is the great lesson. This is the physics of creating a Horcrux. My friends, the lesson is clear. When you degrade or destroy or even threaten the humanity of another person, of another living being, you are in fact attacking your own. What does this mean for public policy? Any public policy that grows out of this particular thorny knot of roots of objectivism, that objectifies people, thereby threatening, destroying their humanity, that will destroy the soul, a word not familiar to this particular Muggle. And certainly she is not a fan of the idea that it destroys the soul of the society itself. Bad public policy that dehumanizes also dehumanizes the people who wrote the policy, the people who vote for the policy, the people who then have to live in a country that dehumanizes its own people. My friends, the threat is great with this particular healthcare law, not because of its details, but because of its direction, because of its roots. My friends, what is at stake is not just the poor and the needy and the elderly and the sick, all those who are uninsured, who are currently now receiving aid from the government through taxes. They are not the only ones at threat. My friends, all of us, if we are going to be a democracy worthy of the name, we cannot create Horcruxes with our public policy. Lastly, my friends, let's just consider what the Bible says about this situation. Does it embrace objectivism? Does it question objectivism? Does it agree with the message of the Harry Potter stories? We need all the help we can get, whether or not you believe in God, my friends. Let's get all the wisdom we can on the Word and Wizard Network. And the passage I draw your attention to, and by the way, there are many that address this particular question, comes from the book of Deuteronomy. Moses is about to die, and he calls the people once again to think about their covenant with God and to renew their covenant with God. He did it when he came off of Mount Sinai, remember, and had the 10 Commandments. But now, just before his death, he says to the people again, here are the commands of God. They are meant for your freedom and your identity. Choose them, he says, and choose life. But here's what I want you to know. If you asked any historian of this period, any historian of religion, any historian of culture, any historian of archaeology, or of scripture or literature, what they would tell you is this particular passage introduces a new idea in the history of ideas. Many other kingdoms at the time of this writing and before had the assumption that the ruler, that the sovereign, the king or the queen or the tyrant had moral responsibility for the weak and the vulnerable in his or her kingdom. This was an assumption. We see it in the writings of many religions and in political documents all throughout Egypt or ancient Mesopotamia. The assumption was what made you a ruler was that you had the power to protect whoever your people were. That was your defense when you attacked other nations. That was your defense when you had public policy. You had moral responsibility for your people, not for anybody else's people. And your people did not have moral responsibility for each other. That came from the sovereign. So, my friends, what we have in this passage is what they call the democratization of moral responsibility. Well, what does that mean? What it means is Moses says to the people, you, individually, each of you. In fact, what he says is gather your women and your children and the men and the visitors, those who are staying in your land, those known and unknown, children yet unborn. As long as you shall live, you shall love the Lord your God. You shall obey God. You are created in the image of God. You have moral obligations. Yes, as God answers to Cain in the story of Cain and Abel. Yes, you are your brother or your sister's keeper. All of you, women and children and men and children yet unborn. In other words, forever moving forward. You have moral obligations to each other. This democratization of care for one another as a baseline moral obligation for humanity. This was seen as a unique idea in Western civilization. Thank you for the people of Israel, because you have actually introduced a new idea that it is not just the king or the queen who has responsibility for the vulnerable. Everyone has responsibility for the vulnerable. This, my friends, is the biblical rebuke of objectivism. This is the biblical rebuke of laissez-faire capitalism. The problem isn't capitalism. The problem is any system set up that says we do not have obligations to other people and therefore do not need the means of government, something like taxes or public policy, to distribute our moral obligation. If you do not do that, you are not morally just. My friends, we now speak to the current Mughal president and to the current Mughal Speaker of the House. Gentlemen, we in the resistance want to make clear that we do not have the answers for every detail of public policy. But we too have favorite philosophers. We too have beacons of truth and wisdom. And they tell us, many of them older than your favorite philosophers, they tell us, as does page after page, chapter after chapter of the life and times of Harry Potter, they tell us with one voice that public policy should express the moral obligation that is inherent in being a human being. We do not choose to enter social contracts. We are born to the social contract of humanity, and we in the resistance insist that our public policy about healthcare, about prisons, about education, about anything reflect that truth. We are each other's brother and keeper, and we have to figure out a way, if we are each other's sister and keeper, we have to find a way, the means, the policies to meet those moral obligations. This particular healthcare bill does not meet those obligations. It fails. So what we say to you is this. You must go beyond the Hippocratic oath which rules medicine to just do no harm in public policy. Here is our oath. It is the same number of words, but it is a conviction that is fueled by scripture, by Harry Potter, and by reason and human experience. Here it is. Create no Horcruxes.